What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over what is essentially the final episode of Revival Platforms and Respawning. We are going to be covering how to get rid of the Revival Platform. Once you get here, say I'm here, it will automatically disappear after 5 seconds, or whatever time we choose, and drop the player. We also want to be able to leave the Revival Platform. I have it forcing them to stay until it reaches the bottom, but then if any key is pressed, any key that belongs to that player is pressed, then the Revival Platform will be destroyed. Because of this logic we have going on, we can also die multiple times now, whereas before we were getting stuck in the recovery state because we had no proper way to reset. So you can see how this works. Now there is technically one thing that is not in this episode. If I could actually coordinate well enough to perform it by myself when there's 4 people. But the Revival Platform itself is actually collidable with other characters, which it should not be. However, I'm going to intentionally ignore this for now because we have a lot of things in this game and in this tutorial series that are going to be only collidable for one character, or we're going to ignore collision for a few characters. So I'm actually going to basically set up a template for what things can and can not interact with other players. So yeah, except for the owner of that player. So because of that, we will just wait on that until later. I don't feel the need to add all that logic in now for this case when we're going to have to add it for larger things down the line. To get started today, it's pretty simple what we're doing. We're going to go to the code, and there's a few things we have to add. Mainly, we have to add the ability to track any input that is pressed by a player or any of the players and destroy the corresponding Revival Platform. And we also need to be able to know when to destroy the platform if, enough time has passed as well. So before we get started, if you want to catch up on any of the episodes in the series, I'll leave a link to the first episode of the series. I'll actually leave a link to the whole playlist, that way you can catch up. And I'll also leave a link to just the first episode of Respawning, because if you just want to check out the Revival Platforms and how we're accomplishing that, you can check out this first episode and follow the next few episodes to get to this point. Otherwise, let's get started. So in our base character, mine is SSB template character, I'm going to add a timer and the related things that we need to determine how long it takes for the Revival Platform to go away on its own. And then we're also going to need to capture input, as I said, to make sure that we can press an input and get rid of it. So I've added a few variables here. This one's not actually important for today because we haven't gone over intangibility, but I did start thinking about it, so I added the variable. It's up to you if you're going to add it or not. I will mention this when we get into that sort of state. If you're not familiar, intangibility just basically means you can't be touched, attacked, hit, anything like that for a certain amount of time once you leave the Revival Platform. Okay. So like how we did the charge attacks and smash attacks for timers and different things like that, we're going to do the same thing for our respawning. I have a float that is called the respawn time. Now, you could set this in the game mode. However, there are actually times when your respawn time changes for how the character died. Like in Super Smash Brothers specifically, if they get launched directly at the screen, their respawn time is actually shorter than if they get launched off the side. So it could be useful to have a respawn time that's actually tied to the character. If you don't plan on doing this, you can have a global respawn time that's in the game mode, or maybe the game instance, and players can set it and change it if you'd like. But regardless, you need a time either in your character or your game mode. And then we need a timer. So an F timer handle, timer. And this is what's going to start and stop the timer, call functions when the timer's up, different things like that. Once you have those two things, we're going to make some functions. In the SSB template character, I'm going to make an exit Revival Platform function. Again, this can be any way that we exit the Revival Platform. So in this case, it's going to be used when we press any key, but you could also use this for the timing as well after 5 seconds have passed. And then let's go into our SSB template game mode.h and look at that stuff first before we get into the logic. So this is also my base game mode. I have these functions in here that are basically blueprint implementable events, so we can handle the logic in the blueprint. And so I have this thing called Destroy Revival Platform. This is a function. It takes in a player number, just like the functions above it. So essentially, it determines what player is on what platform, and when that player is the one that initiates the destruction of the revival platform, it destroys the proper platform. This is important because if we don't have some sort of reference to what revival platform is being destroyed, then you could destroy the wrong one. So you would press an input and it would actually destroy someone else's platform, which doesn't really make sense. Now let's go to the SSB template character, or your base character CPP. You can set the data in here for the defaults. I don't usually set timers, but I did set the respawn time to be 1 second. Okay. Now, in your setup player input component function, this is important. We haven't done this yet, so we need to set this up. Let's go into the code, or excuse me, the engine. Edit project settings and inputs. Then I have all these action and axis mappings that are from other episodes, so I'm going to close them, so we only are looking at the ones that we care about. All these P3, P4s are for keyboard mode, so if you're not using a controller and you want to control multiple characters with one device. Okay, so everything that's closed is not important for today's episode. Everything that's open is. You can see they're all the same thing right now, so it's going to be a little bit weird. Right now, what I have is basically if any key is pressed for any of these players, then they will exit the revival platform. Now, in the future, we'll handle this kind of how we handle other things with inputs that can switch, where we'll go through the logic in the blueprint or the code and specifically add all the inputs that character or player has instead of any key. So basically, anytime they perform a specific action, it will cancel instead of just any key. That's a little bit down the line because we haven't gone over dynamic controls like we have in the fighting game tutorial, so I'm skipping it for now and just using the any key option. But we will get to that, so don't worry. Alright, but I've made 4 input actions just by pressing the plus here. Input actions, action mappings. And then I've called them Exit Revival Platform. Remember, since I have keyboard mode and I do want to support as many players as possible on one device, keyboard mode essentially just means multiple players on a device. It doesn't have to be a keyboard. Could be arcade cabinet, joystick, something like that. Since I'm supporting that, I do need 2, 3, and 4. But if you're using controllers, you'll just need 1. And we're going to bind that in the code. Once you've made these and assigned your keys, you can manually assign the keys if you want. But like I said, we're going to do it programmatically later. So it's kind of a waste of time right now to do that. Make sure you take the exact name. Mine was Exit Revival Platform. And bind the action. You only need the first one. Even if you're doing the keyboard mode stuff like I am. You only need 1. We're going to bind this in code. This is going to be bound to the controller. And the first player on the keyboard. And then the rest of them will be bound in the blueprint for players 2, 3, and 4. But you can copy the other functions in here. Essentially, these setup player input components. You look for an input action. If it's pressed or released. And then call a function when that happens. So we're looking for our Exit Revival Platform input action. Which is any key right now. Then we're seeing if it was pressed, and we're calling the Exit Revival Platform function. So if we scroll down and make this function, Exit Revival Platform, we made it in the header, but we need to actually set it, Exit Revival Platform. Go ahead and make this void character class Exit Revival Platform. And then we need to check if the character can move, first of all. I do this because I intentionally stopped the character from moving in the last episode when the platform was coming down. That way they couldn't just move off right away. If you want that, that's perfectly fine. I wanted the revival platform to come all the way in before they could move off of it, which is why I did it this way. And I basically do the same thing that I've been doing in the other episodes, so this might look very familiar, but I am going to add a few things to the other functions. So just be aware of this. But exit revival platform, I get a game mode reference. The way you do this is you cast. This is setting this game mode reference to this result if this cast succeeds. So we take the get world, get authority game mode, and we cast that to our game mode, SSB template game mode, and the result stores in here. So if the cast fails, this if statement will fail, and this won't happen. If it did and it failed, you would crash, so you do want to put this in an if. Then, if it succeeds, it goes in here, and the game mode ref calls destroy revival platform, which is this function in here that we set in the header file. It's a blueprint implementable event, so we don't actually set anything in the CPP side. And we pass in the character's player number. So whatever character is calling exit revival platform gets their player number passed in. Then I set the character state back to idle. The character state is something we made in the last episode. And I just made some random stuff for now, but the important ones are idle, dead, and respawning. So these states essentially determine what the character is currently doing. When they fall off the map, they die, which causes them to respawn. When they're on the platform, they're respawning. But once we exit the platform, we want to put them back to idle. This is because they have certain permissions, like if you're dead, you can't die again. If you're respawning, you can't die, different things like that. Once you leave the revival platform, you will have some intangibility, which will add as a state later. But for now, setting it back to idle just gives them all the default permissions so they can go and fall off the map and get killed again or whatever needs to happen. All right. And then in the other functions that we have, there's two other functions we had. Respawn is going to stay the same, but we are going to change a little bit to lose life here. So, lose life, we were checking if we weren't dead and we aren't respawning, then we can lose a life. And that was the issue. We were never stopping the character from being in the respawning state, which now, once they leave the revival platform, they go back to idle. But they shouldn't be able to die if they're in either of these two states. Or maybe they should be able to die to falling off the map, whatever. It depends on how we want to set it up. So when they lost a life, the character state was being set to dead. They were being set to not be able to move, and they were losing a life. Then we were updating the lives on the HUD. And then if the lives are greater than 0, we allow them to respawn off of a timer. So the reason we're doing this is new, okay? The reason we're doing this is we were just calling respawn if lives were greater than 0, which does this instantly. However, I wanted a minor delay between getting KO'd and respawning before the revival platform comes down. So we're using our respawn timer that we made in the header file. Respawn timer right here. And we're going to start this timer, and once this timer runs out, we're going to call the respawn function. So that's what's different. So if lives are greater than 0, we do this. Get world, get timer manager, set timer. This is a function you'll have. It's just an Unreal function to set a timer. We need a timer handle, so we use our respawn timer. Don't really have to do anything with the timer before or after. We should clean it up on certain circumstances, but we'll talk about that later. So respawn timer comes in, and it's going to keep track of the time that passes. This is fine. This is just a reference to the class and where to call it. Then we have the function that we want to call. So for the third parameter, we want to put in SSB template character or base character respawn. This is the time that it takes to respawn. And then false is fine. I forget exactly what false does, to be honest, though. Okay, cool. And then respawn gets called, and respawn does the same stuff that it was doing. It calls a game mode reference respawn player function. Now, we set that function up in the last episode, so we'll go into that now. Let's go into our game mode blueprint. And let's look at our functions that we have. We have respawn player, which I haven't changed anything to, but just a quick recap. It's going to determine where the revival platform should spawn based on a few things that we set up. It's going to start playing it, set the character state to be respawning, determine the correct lane to spawn it in, because there's multiple characters that need to be spawned at the same time or around the same time. and it's going to be setting the player to this specific location. Now, this is good. We don't have to attach the player because someone pointed out this, and it's a good point. Whoops, I spawned in the wrong map. I need to fix that map. So if you jump off, you can technically still jump, and you see there's a little bit of gravity and falling animation in there as well. Don't worry. We're going to just make the AniBP only be able to play certain animations when you're in the respawning state. So that's an easy fix. You don't have to actually attach. You can attach. The problem with attaching is that the character can move and should be able to move or attack off of it. If you attach, you'll have to detach while you're doing that, which can be a little bit complicated. The logic behind it's simple, but it can actually cause some bugs with the animations that I've noticed in the past. So that's why I'm doing it that way, but feel free to attach. There's definitely ways to make it work. And now we need to make the Destroy Revival platform. So we made a blueprint implementable event in the game mode called Destroy Revival platform, but we need to actually put this into the game mode blueprint. So make sure you know the name of this function that you made, and then go here and just type it in. And you'll have this right here. And since we have a parameter, a player number, it also has player number. And so the logic here is quite simple. We are going to use the player number to grab from the players array, which is something we've set up a few episodes ago. Basically, it just stores the references to all the players in the game mode. So the game mode knows how many players it should be looping through and how to access them. And yeah, we're going to get it. So if you have your players array, just drag off of that, type get a copy, and then pass in player number. We're not actually going to use it yet. I just did it first because the line of player number, bringing it all the way over here would make it a little bit confusing. So I thought this was neater. But keep that there. And then we're going to do get all actors of class revival platform BP. Now, you could store a reference to revival platforms as they're created and stuff. I don't feel that that's necessary. There should only be as many characters, revival platforms, as there are characters if everyone died at the same time. So it's not going to be a lot of logic to get all actors of class anyway. But we do want to get our revival platform out here because we added a few things to it for how it works. So if you're familiar with the revival platform, which we covered in, again, the previous episodes, we were using a timeline to move the revival platform down in the lane that it's in. And it's pretty simple. We're not changing anything with that. But we were on finished allowing the character to be able to move, which again was intended functionality so that they couldn't leave early. After that, we're going to do something to determine the alive time, because we do want to know if the timer has run out, the character has not acted, and we want to destroy the revival platform with time. So we're going to do this before we do the other things because I think it's important. So in your revival platform BP, we had this character reference before, but now I've added a float called max alive time. So just add variable, change the type to float. And then after can move, or basically on finish of the timeline, we're going to do something called set timer by event. So set timer by event. You can drag off the event and do add custom event and then call it whatever you want. I called mine destroy platform. This event is what's going to handle destroying the platform once time runs out. Okay, so this is a reroute node here. So you don't need that. They'll be confused by that. Basically, you can have a timer that automatically triggers an event when it runs, when the timer is up. All right, and the time that it takes for this timer to finish, just like we did in code, is going to be determined by this max alive time. Now we're going to set the default value in here. When you make a new variable, you have to compile before you can set the default value. So if you don't see it there, if it says please compile blueprint, just hit compile. Then click on the variable. In the details panel, you'll have a default value section. Could be closed, so just open it. And then you can set the time. This is in seconds when you pass it into a timer. So a float of 5.0 is 5 seconds. The timer has a return value. So we already have the event here, destroy platform, but it's not hooked up to anything. We need to make sure that we clear and invalidate the timer by handle. This is cleaning the timer up. We should be cleaning the other timer up in code, but I haven't gotten to that stuff yet. However, this is how we do it in Blueprint. So clearing and invalidating a timer cleans up anything with the timer, the thing that it was keeping track of, and the handle. And this is important because if we don't do this, you could have logic. You could, destroy the timer. Destroy the revival platform, but this timer's still going, and then it can't complete its logic, so it keeps going forever, and it can slow your game down. So what we do is this. We take the return value, it returns a timer handle. And we type clear and invalidate timer by handle. Now, this timer is going to exist if the revival platform exists regardless, and can move only get set to true when it's finished. We need to be able to move before we can perform an action that destroys the revival platform, so regardless, this timer is going to be valid. If the timer is not valid and you can actually do a check to make sure it's valid, it'll be okay. This clear and invalidate timer handle is meant to be able to handle that regardless. So you shouldn't have an issue. But on the destroy platform, all you have to do is bring the white line through that execution line. So you clear and invalidate it off of that return value. And we want to destroy the revival platform. So this is basically the time section to get rid of it after 5 seconds. All right, let's go back to the base game mode BP. And remember, we're getting all actors of class. And then we're using the revival platform class. Revival platform BP. Once you have that, we're doing a for each loop with break. Okay. And we're grabbing the character reference variable off of this. So what's going on here is that we're grabbing all the revival platforms that exist. Okay. We're doing a for each loop with break. Every one of these array elements is now a revival platform. So we're grabbing the character reference from the revival platform, the one that basically this character is being assigned to, or this revival platform is being assigned to this character, whatever way you want to think of it. They are linked. We're grabbing that character reference, and we want to check if it's the one that comes from this player number. So we can make sure we destroy the correct revival platform. That's why the player number is important. So we could drag off the character reference and type equal equal. Say equal object. Straighten everything and make it look nice. And then we take the players array with the player number, the get that we had, and we pass that in. Whoops. We pass that into the other spot on the equals. That's what we're doing up here above. Then we drag off of the branch, or the Boolean return, and make a branch. All right, so I'm going to delete this because you can see it right up above, but that's how that works. We're checking if the character reference on this revival platform is the character that called destroy revival platform. If it is, then we want to actually call the logic to destroy the revival platform early. Destroy platform that we're calling, so only if it's true, is the event that we made here. So either way, if the timer runs out, or if we determine that the player on this platform triggered the destroy platform event, we want to go ahead, clear the timer, and destroy actor. That's how this works. If we do find this to be true, so if we destroy the platform, and then we go ahead and break. You don't have to do this. Breaking is just good for performance issue or performance reasons in this case. We will not have to loop through any of the other actors and check if this character reference is equal to it. Break essentially just stops this loop. It says, all right, we did what we need to, now we can leave. The reason mine looks like this is because if you just drag it in like that, it's ugly. So I've actually made reroute nodes, connected them. That way it's a little bit neater. Lastly, what we need to do is go make sure this works for all players. This functionality is actually complete now. Player 1 can go and destroy their revival platform if they perform an action or if time runs out. This will also work if you're using controllers for all players. However, if you are using keyboard mode, we will need to call the function at the correct time for the other characters. So for 2, 3, and 4. So if we go into a character BPs, and you have to do this for every character, or if you have a base character BP, then you can do it like that too. But either way, Everything here can stay the same, so everything that you have from the other tutorials is good. Just make sure where you're doing like, forward attack P2, move right P2, forward attack P3, move right P3, and P4, so on. We need to add our new input action, exit revival platform. Those are the ones we made in the project settings earlier. So you just look for it, exit revival platform P2. I already have one, so I don't need this one. And we do the same logic as always. We make sure that the player that we're trying to perform the action on is valid. And in case you need a refresher, we already have our player references and our character for keyboard mode. You can right click on it, convert to validated get, drag through that. Only if it's valid, call the function. This is an SSB template character, so it has access to the code functions. So call exit revival platform. Do it for P3 and P4. Once you do it for all the characters you have, all characters should have the ability to destroy their revival platforms. And now the dying respawning logic is essentially completed. So there you go, guys. That's a pretty good way to end the whole dying respawning for now. There's a lot more we have to do with intangibility in different states, but those are things that we can figure out once we get more functionality in that we actually need. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this video helped, and if it did, please subscribe. It does more for me than anything else you can do for the channel. Just lets me know that I'm doing a good job and you're learning what you want to learn. I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon members and my YouTube membership subscribers. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support that you give. I really, really appreciate it, and I cannot wait to see where we continue to bring these series. Every single week I get more and more excited. If you had any issues with this tutorial or you need any assistance with any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. It's mentioned in the description, and we'll be happy to help you with any of the problems that you had. Lastly, guys, if you want to come hang out and watch some games with us, watch us play some games, Apex or Sekiro or other Dark Souls games, then you can catch us here on Twitch or at the YouTube Shawnthebro 27 channel. Anyway, thanks again, guys. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, everyone.